I think we're live on YouTube. I'm just connecting to Instagram as well. Right. Okay. I think we're live. Um, we can start the session now.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So, good evening to everyone who's tuned in. Today's topic of discussion is electoral malapportionment in India. Options for correction, based on the EPW article that discusses the same. We're joined by two eminent speakers today, so allow me to introduce you to them. Dr. R. Srinivasan is a full-time member of the State Planning Commission in the government of Tamil Nadu. Previously, he was an economics teacher for more than 3 decades and retired as professor in the Department of Economics, University of Madras. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. Dr. S. Raja Sethudurai is a professor of economics at the University of Hyderabad, India. Before this, he worked as assistant professor of economics at Pondicherry University and Madras School of Economics. A very warm welcome to you as well, sir.
Thank you. Good evening.
So, can we begin this conversation by understanding the term electoral malapportionment a bit better? And why, according to you, does it remain a deeply contested term against the backdrop of the first past the post system?
See, in an first past post system, all that we need is a simple majority to be elected. So there can be several contestants, and whoever gets the highest number of votes would be declared elected. That means the winner takes everything, and all others are discriminated as having lost it. So it could be as low as even 10% of the total votes. Normally, it is around 30 to 40% votes today. But mathematically, it is possible that even a 10% vote makes someone to be declared as winner when the number of contestants are more and the remaining 90% is distributed among. So, in the first past the post, since the winner takes all, it is very important that the constituencies are carefully redrawn. And one more concept that comes here is called the one person, one vote.
Yes.
So we assume that every person should be equally represented in the legislature. That's why we give one person, one. So obviously, the corollary of that idea is if one person, one vote has to be ensured, then every representative should be elected by a constituency where the number of voters are almost equal across constituencies. So if we have, say, 534 in the Lok Sabha, we want the entire Indian population to be divided into 5,000 compartments. That is what 534 constitutes. So every constituency will have equal number of people. So everyone is equally represented in the legislature. So where if constituencies have equal population size, then there is no maldistribution at all. And this is possible in a unit where you can frequently redraw the constituencies based on the number of people or number of voters, whatever that you do. But in a federal setup, it takes a different turn. We want even every state to have an equal representation in the Lok Sabha. Because here, the states are not divided by the population, the states are divided by linguistic groups. So, in which case, the size of each state in terms of population may not. So, obviously, every state will not get equal representation in the Lok Sabha.
Yes.
So, even to start with, there will be a system where, though every state will have a proportionate representation in the Lok Sabha, which means that their representation will be in proportion to the proportional population they hold. If
Yes.
Tamil Nadu has about 6% of the total population of the country, then it will have 6% of the total number of seats in the Lok Sabha.
Right.
If UP has 20% of the country's population, then it may have 20% of the Lok Sabha. So this is how normally the seats will be distributed across states. And at any starting point, this may appear to be a very normal distribution since there is no maldistribution at all. But over a period of time, when the population growth differs, then to that extent, the politics of representation comes in. So the states whose population is growing faster compared to another state whose population is growing slower, then the states which are growing slower in terms of population will lose their representation, proportional representation in the
Right.
Lok Sabha. So
Right.
that is where the thing is being contested from a political angle of representation.
Right. Thank you for laying out the context to us and explaining the basic concepts. Uh, could you also explain the constitutional framework established for delimiting constituencies in India? Either of you can take up the question.
The constitution is what we did the first decade. That is after every census drawn on the first year of a decade. So it was in 51, 61, 71, so on and so forth. So after every census is done, then the redistribution of constituencies across states from the Lok Sabha is done. What we call it as delimitation.
Right.
That delimitation is done by an act of the parliament. So parliament passes an act how the delimitation is done,
Right.
and which normally uses that one person, one vote, as well as every constituency should be of equal population size.
Hmm.
See, there is an incongruence in the idea of one vote and population. It is not that everyone in the population should be voting, because it is people above the age of 18 and those who have registered for as voters alone can vote. So, practically, what we are trying to do in the case of delimitation, we are not segregating the constituencies in terms of active voters. We are actually segregating in terms of population, which may include even children below the age of 18, as well as people who have not registered for vote. So the entire population is taken. That is the first incongruence between the idea of one person vote and the delimitation of. We'll have to bear that. So three delimitations have after 51, 61, 71. After 71, it was done. At that time, it was frozen that because you know that uh, population control policy was very seriously implemented during the decade, that is from somewhere around mid 19th. So many of the states, particularly the southern states, could control the population growth significantly compared to the other states.
Right.
So this reduced the population relatively in the southern, and they argued that cannot be penalized because the population growth was reduced in the states. So 76, the delimitation was that is henceforth for another 25 years there would not be any delimitation exercise. Practically meaning after 81 and after 81 census, we will not do a delimitation.
Okay.
So the next delimitation would happen only after 2006. But after 2001 census, once again in 2006-7, the next delimitation started. Even at that time, once again, though delimitation for geographical boundaries were redrawn for the country, constituencies, but the distribution of seats across states was not clear. Once again, they didn't want to equalize the southern states who were able to control population. So the delimitation exercise done in 2000 was not about redistribution of Lok Sabha seats across states, but it is about the redrawing the constituency boundaries within the state, keeping the total number of seats in the Lok Sabha as it was in 1976. Once again, it was ruled that it would revisit after 21, but 21 census is still very evasive. Government has not taken the census 21. So we do not know, there is no signal when this will be done. But we have a reasonable assumption that it would be done after the general election. So somewhere from 25 or 20 happen. In which case the new census would also take up redistribution of Lok Sabha seats across. So that creates a new debate about how delimitation.
Right. So I'll come to the population aspect in just a bit. But coming to Professor Guru, in your paper for EPW, you also explored the theoretical possibilities and variants of apportioning Lok Sabha seats across states and its effects on political decision. Could you elaborate on the same?
See, in simple terms, mall apportionment can also be, known as the difference between the state's share of the national population and its share in the national legislation. Okay, so the simple measure to calculate the mall apportionment is the difference between these two. Uh,
Right.
So, if uh, think in terms of the growing population. See, you asked about the constitutional provisions as explained by Dr. Srinivasan. Uh,
Yes.
Article 81 of the Constitution advocates that an equal population to seat ratio determines the number of Lok Sabha seats across the states.
Yes.
So every Lok Sabha seat should have equal number of population. That is what it means. But uh, the states are not, drawn in terms of population. It is in terms of linguistic identities. So we obviously have, different size of states. So
Yes.
that's why we are having this small apportionment. So, if you ask the theoretical thing, so as I said, the malapportionment index can be constructed like the difference between the proportion of seats in the national legislative and the proportion of population a particular state has. So, if you see that, taking the population estimate of 2023, the mall apportionment index, as we mentioned in the paper,
Yes.
is around 7.17%, which indicate that almost 38 seats are mall apportioned. In the sense that 38 Lok Sabha seats have been, distributed in a skewed manner, so it has to be realigned. So, if you take that 38 seats to be effectively redistributed from the lower population states to the higher population states, then the smaller states which has lower population will lose 38 seats to bigger states. Okay, because the total number of Lok Sabha seats is frozen from 1976. So there is, it has to be, rethink only in 2026. So since that freeze is there,
Right.
it has to be redistributed from the low population, smaller states, and to the bigger states. So this obviously, imbalance the political equation, and the federal relation in the country will be definitely affected by this. If you take out some seats from lesser popular population states and give it to the larger population states, obviously, it is like losing the political power of the small smaller states.
Got it. Um, you also explained that to decide the size of a constituency based on population, we should decide the size of the legislature. That is, the size of the legislature and the size of the constituency shall be decided simultaneously. With reference to this quote from your article, could you explain Tagapera's hypothesis, which you discuss in some detail in our piece, and its implications for Indian democracy?
Okay, most of the theoretical studies have actually suggested that the size of the constituency, okay, so the population to seat ratio, how much population should be there to see. If you go back historically and see the discussions in the Constituent Assembly discussions, they started with 6 lakh population should have one MP, and then gradually it has been increased, and finally it is almost decided to be at 10 lakh population should have one member of parliament.
Right.
Okay, so this size of the constituency determines the size of the legislature. Smaller constituency, if you think that smaller population size will have one representative, then it obviously increase the size of the legislature.
Right.
First of all, we have to think what is the constituency size. So that determines the legislature size depending on the population.
Right.
Uh, but most of the theoretical argument is that smaller constituencies always have a better representation,
Mhm.
and it also reflect the regional variations and the political plurality within a state. So that is the argument for smaller size of the constituency, so that the larger size of the legislator. But
Yes.
what particularly Tagapera has hypothesized is that he actually determined the size of legislator by size of population and the degree of social mobilization.
Yes.
Degree of social mobilization in the sense that it is a two-way communication channel.
Mhm.
So the representative who is representing the population should communicate the aspirations of the population to the parliament, and also whatever decision taken in the parliament should be communicated back towards to the population.
Right.
So this two-way channel should be there.
Mhm.
So what he argued is that this communication channel will be more if there is higher degree of social mobilization. So he used that not every person in the constituency will able to communicate to the representatives. So he actually used kind of mobilization in terms of adult literacy rate, adult working age population, and regional groups. And some of the proxies are used to construct this social mobilization concept. But he derived a very simple cubic rule where an assembly size is determined by the fraction of literate adult in the total population. The cube root of that will determine the size of the optimal size of the legislation.
Okay. Okay. Against
May
this,
I add, may I add a point to that?
yes.
Actually, what Tagapera hypothesis tries to explain is
Yes.
that when the underlying society is very much divided or
Mhm.
varied in terms of various identities,
Mhm.
to that extent, you may have to have constituencies of different size.
Mhm.
Suppose there is one constituency of a very small size,
Mhm.
but the social mobilization in that constituency is so varied, then it
Right.
has to remain smaller. Simultaneously, another constituency will be larger because it is more homogeneous in terms of the social mobilization.
Mhm.
So, Tagapera's hypothesis would not lead to equal size of constituency. That will not be there,
Right.
but it will decide on the optimal number of constituencies needed for any effective legislation to work. If the
Yes.
legislature has to be very effective, then it has to work on reflecting the social mobilization that happens in the. So
Yes.
that is the basic. Yeah.
Right. So against this context, I also have another quote from your article which says, "The larger the constituency, the smaller will be the scope for minorities to be represented appropriately." Could you elaborate more on this?
See, suppose if I see, then the size of population today
Hmm.
will be about 40% more than what it was in 1971.
Okay.
So obviously, we expect if the size of constituencies today should be same as it was in 1971, then we'll have to increase the number of constituencies to double. That means we should have increased the Lok Sabha constituencies from 534 to 1068.
Right.
But that is to keep the constituency size in terms of population constant,
Hmm.
because we think that that is the size of population a constituency should have to be very effective. But
Hmm.
the problem here is if you have 1000 members in the Lok Sabha,
Okay.
then to that extent, it becomes very unwieldy to take decisions in the Lok Sabha
Hmm.
itself. Because so far we have been practicing smaller number.
Hmm.
So politically, it may be difficult initially. I don't say that it should not be.
Hmm.
Second reason is, suppose assuming that we want to,
Hmm.
that means each constituency will have double the size of population as it was in 19.
Right.
To that extent, the larger constituencies is actually homogenizing the underlying differences in the society. Because a constituency with about, say, 10 lakh population will
Yes.
definitely have varied social identities, religious identities, linguistic identities, but those will not be properly represented if there is only one member. So there is a trade-off between these two. The
Yes.
larger constituency will lead to a larger majority to be the rule, and smaller constituencies will accommodate the minority, but it will also have a very
Yeah.
diversified political system and making the decision making process a bit cumbersome. But we'll have to decide what is the trade-off that we would have and allow that to happen.
Definitely, there's a fine balance that needs to be struck. Um,
See, I think these are all is a resultant of the system we have, the first past
yes.
the post system.
Yes.
Larger constituency, obviously not representing the uh, cultural or religious or regional variances.
Hmm.
But smaller constituency also has a problem in the decision making process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Coming to my next question, what do some of the cross countries that you cite in your article reveal? For instance, you try to correlate the grandfather clause in the Canadian Constitution to the Indian case. So, what are some of the implications of the same?
Raja, you can say.
Yeah. See, as I said, the mall apportionment based on the 2023 population estimate is 7%, around 7%. So 38 seats have to be, realigned from taking from the smaller states to the biggest states. So
Right.
this realignment, creates a problem because some states which already has a particular representation should be deprived of that particular seat. So what Canada as a federation they have done is they introduced this grandfather class
Hmm.
to maintain a fair distribution of apportionment through the Representation Act of 1985,
Okay.
which actually guaranteed each province the seat it had previously. That will remain there.
Right.
Okay, so whatever apportionment they are going to take, will not disturb or take away any seats from the provinces they already have.
Okay.
They can only add to the provinces where they have less representation. So that particular class actually maintaining the already existing number of representatives or number of parliament seats. If you see, that also helps in the apportionment in the Indian case with the increased population size. Uh, because the apportionment, if you see the malapportionment, will not change much. It will not go till 7%. It will be around 3%, even if we keep the existing number of seats
Right.
to the states. Okay, as the benchmark. So there won't be any change in the existing number of seats already given to the states. Whatever is deprived of by the larger population state will be added to it. So that is the baseline for this particular class. This can
Right.
also be adapted, but the real issue here is it is not about taking a seat from one particular state and giving it to other.
Yeah.
If the population decline is a cultural thing,
Mm.
but there was a policy which has been introduced that actually caused this particular change in the population growth.
Mm.
So that actually is the real issue which has to be addressed fairly for those states which have effectively implemented this policy.
Yes. Yes.
Only
If
what is required here,
yes.
I'll make a comparison. For instance, if Uttar Pradesh has 80 parliamentary constituencies, Lok Sabha constituencies, and Maharashtra has 40, then this ratio of 1 is to 2 should be maintained even after delimitation by the new population. So if the number of constituencies in Uttar Pradesh goes up to say 160,
Mm.
then the number of constituencies in Maharashtra should go to 80, so that the ratio remains the same. But the fallout of that would be Maharashtra will have constituencies of smaller population, whereas Uttar Pradesh will have constituencies of larger population. So that
Right.
will be the outcome, which is as much as what is today.
Yeah, yeah,
So we'll have to find a middle ground between the ratio of 1 is to 2, how it has to be tempered so that it can be 1 is to 1.5 or 1 is to 2.5. That is a political normative judgment that we will be taking up.
Right. Right. Noted. Uh, you also argue that with increasing centralization of fiscal and political powers with the Union, the genuine fear of the southern states losing both political power and economic base for being prudent in controlling their population growth deserves to be addressed. In what manner do you think this can be achieved?
We had argued in other articles we had written,
Okay.
because population is one of the important determinants of the transfer of resources from the union to the state. So there also, if you take the current population, that is the 15th Finance Commission had taken the current population, that is
Yes.
2011 population as the base. So obviously the larger states with larger population would get a larger transfer. So the smaller states with smaller population would get a smaller amount of transfer. So this is, as long as population remains a determinant both for political representation as well as for economic transfer, then the states that control population will be at the receiving end on both sides. Both politically, their representativeness is questioned and limited, and their receipt of resources from the union government will also be curtailed to that extent. So that is why we argued that the differences in population growth should be accommodated in all these formulas used by the Finance Commission or other uh, resource transfers mechanisms, because a state cannot be penalized twice. for controlling population, both at the political end as well as at the economic.
Right. Uh, Dr. Zari, would you like to have any remarks?
No, actually, some form of incentives as given by the 15th Finance Commission to validate the demographic performance, which gives incentive to those states which have effectively controlled the population. So some form of incentive to be thought to be give in this particular apportionment as well. So one such incentive mechanism we have already mentioned in the paper, to use the difference in the fertility rate and how to compensate that.
Yes.
So that has already been discussed in that paper. So we have to think of some incentive mechanism so that the states which have effectively implemented this particular population policy
Mm-hmm.
will not affect it, as Dr. Srinivasan also said. So
Right.
it is actually a double hit. So
Mm-hmm.
one from the political angle and another from the economical resource redistribution perspective. So in both these things, those states which effectively control population will get affected. So some form of incentives should work.
Yes. Yes. I think on that note, we can conclude this particular session. Um, Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. The paper we've discussed today is available on our website, so you can access it there. We'd also like to, as a side note, request you to subscribe to our channel and support us on our social media. Um, Thank you once again to both of our speakers for sharing your valuable insights on such a pertinent topic, and also discussing the possible pathways moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.